Hi, so this deck of cards is going to facilitate working through a responding to the world passage or standalone question dealing with emotion. So emotions. And a lot of the cards are definition cards. So you're going to see that I totally, again, break the rules for index carding and I put way too much information on the front side. And it's just for either the definition or to set up contextual understanding. So just bear with me. All right. The blank, which includes the periaqueductal gray, an area stimulated by the amygdala during startle reflex. And to see a startle reflex in a baby, just YouTube it, is a relay station for the integration of sensory information. So what brain structure is this? So the blank is the midbrain, okay? So go back and see what the front side of the card says, but it's the midbrain. The lateral and basolateral amygdala receive input from N blank N, V blank N, and A blank N. So what are the three inputs received by the amygdala? That would be nociception, vision, and audition, okay? And here is where the amygdala is located right here. This tiny little section above the midbrain, in front of the cerebellum, right? It's beneath the hypothalamus and hippocampus. So it's like a little peanut looking thing right here. And I'm sorry I said nociception. This is a word that I always confuse, but it's actually nociception, and that's like pain input. Like if you were to put your hand on the stove or inflict someone with pain, they would have like some type of nociception, which I hope you're not doing, because doctors are healers, not hurters. Output to the blank causes startle reflex. Again, YouTube startle reflex. So output to what part of the brain causes startle reflex? That would be the pons, and it's this higher section of the midbrain right here. Right, so just take it all in for a moment. P blank L behaviors such as volunteering have the largest effect on happiness. And I know largest is a superlative word. I'm not sure what I'm comparing it to here, but if you were to have this like as a question, a standalone question on the MCAT, and they ask you which one has the largest effect, you would pick whatever I'm about to tell you that belongs right here. That would be prosocial behaviors. So prosocial behaviors have large effects on happiness in a good way. Anxiety is an M blank, not an emotion. So anxiety is an M blank, not an emotion. So what is anxiety categorized as? That would be a mood. And a few cards later, you're going to see what the difference is between like a mood versus an emotion. So just hold that thought for a moment. C blank X, E blank S requires that the person expressing that emotion understands and is aware of him or herself, the self in relation to others, eliciting the emotion. So these are the people drawing the emotion out of you, and how the expression of that emotion, like are you jumping up and down if you're happy, or you're throwing a temper tantrum if you're angry, would be viewed by the other people. So like when in any specific culture that you're in, I'm not sure what part of the world you're located in, because I have actually people who watch all over the world, which I'm pretty surprised. And shout out to Malta. I don't know who's watching this stuff in Malta, but you guys, I have my largest audience retention there. And shout out to New York, because in the US, my largest audience retention is like New York. And here in Florida, that's like second largest. All right? So complex emotions. Complex emotions. And A blank Y, H blank C occurs when a judgment is made based on the perceived probability, the extent that one can remember or imagine similar occurrences, or whatever information is available. So an A blank Y, H blank C. What is this phenomenon? That would be an availability heuristic, okay? So Wikipedia, or rather, better yet, YouTube it if you want to know more about it. This is just a quick thing. I'm not trying to, do an expository on the topic, else it would defeat the whole purpose of index carding. F blank E blank is an observation regarding the growth of IQ from one generation to the next. So what phenomenon is this? That would be the Flynn effect, which purports that IQ grows from one generation to the next. The Flynn effect. C blank A, no, just C blank, A blank, such as pleasure, tension, or energy, can exist in isolation or as a component of moods and emotions. So what is this phenomenon? And remember, the explanation of moods versus emotions is coming up later. Core affect. This would be core affect. So just, rewind a little bit to see what the front side of the card mentioned. Blank typically lasts longer than emotions, are global as opposed to specific, and often relate to a worldview about everything or about the world in general. Okay? That would be mood. So that's the definition card for mood. So rewind it, and emotion is coming up in a little bit. So moods, they're global, they're not specific. An experience of an blank or a prototypical emotional episode is composed of multiple occurring components. So what is this? I think you know what it is by now. That's right, you guessed it, an emotion. The co-occurring components of an blank include a core affect, attention, appraisal, and attribution. I think that's like an example of alliteration. Directed at the eliciting stimulus and the experience of the elicited blank, including congruent behavior, that's behavior that's expected, and neural/endocrine changes. So the same word goes in both these blanks. What is it? That would be emotion. So that's emotion again. Prototypical E blank are elicited by stimulus, a reaction to stimulus, and cognitively appraised. An example of this is love. Love is a complex set of interrelated constituent events directed at a specific object. I love the topic of love. Throughout my whole life, I just love the thought of being in love rather than the person that was involved. That would be an emotional episode. So an emotional episode. L blank T blank requires that interpretation must happen before arousal or emotion, which happen simultaneously. Okay, so here's the sequence that this thing is talking about. The event first, let's say an encounter with a bee, was interpreted as threatening before a physiological response. That would mean, the sympathetic system, fight or flight. And and simultaneously, the emotion fear were to be perceived simultaneous. So what is this phenomenon? And it's specifically related to the sequence of events and emotional experiences. That would be Lazarus theory. So Lazarus theory. S blank R dash S blank R theory describes an encounter similar to the last card. Well, an event such as an encounter with a bee, which simultaneously elicits a physiological response, fight or flight, and then an interpretation of the event. If these agree with the emotion is then experienced. So this is a just slightly different sequence, and the physiology has to agree with the interpretation in order for the emotion to be experienced. So what phenomenon is this? That would be Schachter Singer theory. So Schachter Singer theory. So it slightly opposes Lazarus theory. E blank L, I blank E is the ability to understand emotions present in oneself, okay, and how these emotions motivate oneself and others. So what is this? All right, this is a thing in which, my opinion, a lot of dudes don't have, and that's emotional intelligence. Men never know what the heck I'm feeling. All right, so that's emotional intelligence. Damage to the B blank L, G blank A causes problems recognizing angry facial expressions. So damage to what part of the brain would cause this inability? That would be the basal ganglia, and this is a basic illustration of the brain, slightly different from what the real sagittal slice would look like. But here goes the basal ganglia. And this again is a sagittal slice of the brain because you split it in half from front to back, okay? Between the eyes. The A blank is most associated with the recognition of the facial expressions associated with fear. So what brain structure is most associated with the recognition of facial expressions associated with fear? All right, you probably guessed it. That would be the amygdala. Okay, so the amygdala, which is this little, peanutty thing right here, is the brain structure that recognizes, facial expressions associated with fear. The H blank S is necessary for fair conditioning. So what brain structure is necessary for fair conditioning? What structure is this? That would be the hippocampus, all right? And the hippocampus is this little cord-like insert right here that kind of loops around. It's the light blue hue. All right, so that's it right there. The blank is the brain structure most associated with disgust. The anterior blank receives signals from the senses of olfaction and gustation, that's smelling and taste, while the posterior blank receives signals from audition and somatosensation. That's like hearing and the feeling of touch. And all these blanks are the same word. So what part of the brain is this? I'll give you a moment to think. All right, so it's going to be the insula, or more specifically, the insular cortex, which if you were to look at the side of the brain, this is a coronal cross-section of the brain, by the way, but it would be this like infolding cortex region right here. So this region is the insula, okay?